1867 Sports Show episode number Jeff Chikrin tonight. The big 2-0, Mr. Skinner. What's happening, brother?
Well, we're ready to talk a whole bunch of sports that we've let slide for a little bit tonight. Picks and I'm fired up, but I don't think I'm quite as fired up as you were after the I guess nearly disastrous third period that your beloved Edmonton Oilers had. But you've got to be a happy man that your Oil are advancing to the Western Conference Final to take on a pretty familiar foe in your playoff lore there.
Absolutely. And before I get into that, obviously our episode numbers pay homage to what we are going to speak about during the episode. So Jeff Chikrin, for many of you who recognize the last name, is the father of Ottawa Senators defenseman Jacob Chikrin. So just wanted to kind of throw a jab at Kyle with that one, just to let him know that, Jacob Chikrin hasn't sniffed the playoffs in his whole career.
And did you notice how I just completely glossed right over that whole fact right there? I was like, not tonight, Satan.
Yeah. And again, for a lot of you old Edmonton Oilers fans, Jeff Chikrin once adorned the number 20 for the Edmonton Oilers in the mid-90s. So there's your tie into tonight's show. But let's get into the absolute barn burner of a series that Edmonton and Vancouver just put on. I mean that with all sincerity. Those two teams could not have been more evenly matched when you looked at the on-ice product. I have to give, and I'm going to give a golf clap right out of the gate to Vancouver, because my goodness, what a hockey team they have. Rick Tocchet had them literally playing the best hockey that you could have imagined for that lineup. And there is no quit in the Vancouver Canucks. Like you just mentioned, almost a disastrous third period again for Edmonton. It seemed like every time they got some momentum, they got a lead, Vancouver was going right back in and putting the puck in their net. So
were you just reliving all of your playoff horrors when that second goal got potted with like about 4 minutes left still?
You know what the funny part is that, we had mentioned during the playoff preview that this is a different Edmonton Oilers team. They look so much better than what they have in years past. And they literally reverted back in a few of the games to what they were. It's like playing not to lose instead of playing to win. And I think that's where they found themselves kind of giving up those leads in a few of those games that, should have been decided early on. But we talked about it earlier today. But the two guys who I got to give the utmost respect for, because again, if you're not a true fan of the actual team, you don't know who they are. But Connor Garland, number one, what a hockey player that guy is. Like you talk about energy that he brings on the ice. Like every time he was on the ice, he had the puck on his stick in the opposing zone. And it was maddening as being an Oiler fan, because it's like, just take it from him. He's 5'7", but the guy's a great skater. He's ferocious. He's tenacious. And every time they needed a big goal, it was Connor Garland, right? And again, I think that you have to give. This is the no-brainer. You have to give props to the goaltender for Vancouver. Again, pardon me, I can't really remember what his first name is, but Shilov's the Latvian goaltender.
I'll give you the first. I'll give you the first name. You can
there you go.
Dabble with the Russian last name.
There you go. It's a Latvian last name. Artur Shilov's. Man, you would expect a third string goaltender to just kind of be a sieve in there, just kind of mailing it in, just be happy to be playing the playoffs. But that guy looked like a 10-year veteran when he was in there. And the only reason that series went more than 5 games was because of Artur Shilov's. Yeah. So, I got to give those two guys props. Like the Brock Bessers of the world, that guy just owns the Edmonton Oilers, and, don't want to see someone miss time with a serious injury like he has with blood clots. But, that was obviously a huge loss for them in Game 7. But, Vancouver's got nothing to hang their head about. That was one of the best series. And again, we called it right from the get-go. Because again, if you're not understanding what we do here on this show, we predict the future, everybody. Yeah. But that was such a great series from game 1 to game 7, and you couldn't have asked for anything better than that. So yeah, from an elation standpoint, more relief than anything, because yeah, they definitely deserve to win, but I could also see Vancouver deserving to win at the same time. And now we got to tee up, again, the old faithful Dallas Stars in the playoffs one more time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kudos to the Vancouver Canucks fans as well too, because it would have been very easy to look up at the scoreboard, be like, down 3-0. I don't even know what the shots were. I think at one point it was something like 25-9
It
or
was 22-4 at one point.
yeah, exactly, right? So you count on one hand how much offense your team has put out there, and really, at the end of the day, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. There's just too many losses to that lineup where they look very different with a Thatcher Demko in net, with a Brock
Yeah.
Bouncer on their top line, right? And it's going to be the classic clean out your locker room, and now we find out who was playing with what torn labrum and broken bone here and this, that, the other this week. So they were definitely just a black and blue unit, but it would have been very easy, especially for a fan base that is on the edge of their seat, has been known to overreact perhaps in the past, we'll say politely there, like the
Yeah.
Canucks have, but they hung in it. And when that first one went in, the roof on the building
Yeah.
looked like it was about to blow off. And then, a couple minutes later, that second one goes in. I tweeted out early in the game that when they had that 4-minute power play and it was 0-0, I was like, this seems like a really important moment in the game. If Vancouver, especially with their power play struggles that they had in the series up to that point, if they don't get one here, I don't like their odds tonight. And then I was feeling prophetic all of a sudden, right? Like, oh, here they go, down 3-0, absolutely caved into their own end the entire time. And then all of a sudden, 1-2, and now I'm thinking, oh my god, like I could, we're going to be replaying the Simpsons moment where you can pinpoint the moment that Kyle Kirkwood's heart breaks here. But
and I was waiting for that moment too, but very strategic timeout by Chris Knobloch, and that's why I think they've had the success that they've had, was because of his calming influence back there, because he'll be the first one to admit he got out coached in 3 of those 7 games, like very badly. And Rick Tocchet did a masterful job on his end. But yeah, I think that was the deciding factor. That timeout with 3.5 minutes left, you could tell, Edmonton's nerves kind of came back down to earth. And as soon as they, got the puck out, got possession, and then you see Zach Hyman doing yeoman's work in the offensive end, keeping the puck in there for over a minute, and you can just see, you could hear the noise in the stadium just keep gradually decreasing and decreasing when that happens. So yeah, I mean, I got to give credit all around to that. But yeah, I mean, Vancouver fans were phenomenal. I mean, even getting behind the guys that were struggling, like trying to get Elias Pettersson going, JT Miller, whenever he was on the ice, trying to get him, because obviously he was flying in the first few games and then just disappeared in the last 3.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that they were getting behind their guys. It's kind of like a different fan base now too, not just a different team, but a different fan base. Like you mentioned, they've been known for their odd, riot and not really handling losses in the playoffs all that well. But
even the media, right? They were kind of known as Toronto West, where like if you don't like being under the microscope, Vancouver and Toronto were kind of the 2 hotbeds to avoid. And then obviously Montreal is its own animal, which we'll dissect some other day there. But yeah, it really is a turning over of a new leaf, and the fact that Game 7, you lose on home ice, and every fan in the building is staying there and clapping the team off the ice, as opposed to raining down boos and here come the jersey tosses from the cheap seats. And like those were legitimate things that used to happen. So it was kind of refreshing to see that. So I'll give a little golf clap to the Vancouver Canucks fan base there. But before we wrap up this topic here, a little bit of history, because you've got not 1, not 2, but 3 players now for Edmonton who have 20 plus points here in the playoffs. One of which is on the blue line, and that doesn't happen all that often in the NHL there. So our friend with the Booch bomb is you called it right from the start of the playoffs as far as who needs to step up. And you avoided giving it the old McDavid. We'll look at the top line here. So
Yeah. You know what? And when your name is mentioned in the stratosphere with Paul Coffey and Bobby Orr,
mhm.
you're doing something right. And that's where he's in right. He's got the most points from a defenseman in 2 rounds in NHL history. Prior to Game 7, he was in the conversation with Paul Coffey and Bobby Orr. So I mean, you're talking about the two, gold standards for offensive defensemen in NHL history. And Evan Bouchard is now putting himself in that category. And everybody likes to talk about, he's got the Bouch bomb and he's like, one-timer specialist from the point. Do you see where he's scoring most of his goals and how he's scoring most of his goals?
Well, it was like
He
we were talking about earlier with Zach Hyman, where it's like the ugly goals are what is going to win you playoff series, and he's
Yeah,
adopted that mentality. So clearly, he listened to our episode.
100%. And I think that it's more strategic than it is, just pure luck, right? Because as you know, scoring in the playoffs gets 10 times harder than it is in the regular season. And the fact that I think Bouchard understands that to say, you know what, if I have a clear path to the net and I can somehow fit the puck in between these two defenders, there's a good chance it's going to go off somebody, might go off a post. Like he's doing the things that a smart defenseman does. And he's really kind of, alleviating a lot of those offensive pressures off of the top two lines for Edmonton, which is exactly what you kind of hope for out of the third and fourth line.
Yeah.
And not having an Adam Henrique in game 6 or 5, 6, and 7 was a huge loss. People don't understand how big that loss was. He was playing top 2 minutes, but kind of catalyzing that that third line. Um, it's a very nice and calming thing when you've got your defensive core. And again, we talked about this many a time so far. Like Edmonton's defense looks different this year.
Mhm.
From the top,
And
pairing
not
of
just
Bouch.
from last year either, like
No,
from historically
from
going
historical
back to those
purposes.
dynasty,
Yeah,
Oilers teams.
100%. Because you look at the top pairing. I mean, Bouchard and Ekholm, name me a better defensive pair in the playoffs right now.
Mhm.
You can't. Then you go to the second pairing with Nurse and Desharnais. Who knew that they were going to be a good matchup because, Nurse is a good skater, decent puck mover, good in his defensive zone. Desharnais is probably the most improved player on any team, from last year to this year. That guy couldn't even skate last year, and now he looks like a bona fide top 4 defenseman. And then you go with the third pairing, and I mean, they've been arguably, challenging that top pairing for the best group with Cody Ceci and Brett Kulak. And I mean, I talk about Brett Kulak so much with, all my friends and family whenever we talk about Edmonton. That guy is probably the most unheralded player, not only on Edmonton, but probably in the Western Conference. Like, if you go watch Edmonton play, every time Brett Kulak is on the ice, he's taking the puck away from the opposition. He's moving the puck ahead efficiently. He skates probably better than 99% of NHL level defensemen. And he's just a smart player. And I remember when they first got him from Montreal years ago, I thought, you know what, this guy's going to fight for like a 7th or 8th defenseman. And he's really grown on me to become one of my favorite players to watch on the team. So the fact that they've got all 3 defense pairings that you can trust as a fan, it's such a reassuring feeling. And yeah, I mean, the fact that, we've got both goalies now who've gone in and played some big minutes, made some big stops, and had some big wins for this team. That bodes well because I mean, obviously, there's a lot of questions about Pickard coming into this playoff because it's like, well, what if Stuart Skinner falters? What if he goes down with an injury? Well, I think we can put those to bed because he looks like he's ready for the big time in that event. So yeah, now it's onward to Dallas, and obviously Dallas is kind of doing the yeoman's work of every Edmonton or other fan out there right now because they've not only eliminated the Las Vegas Golden Knights, but they just eliminated the perennial, number one overall, selection to win the Stanley Cup every year with the Colorado Avalanche. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, to me, it's a great thing because the two dragons that have been in Edmonton's way the last, 4 years are gone.
Mm-hmm.
But now you've got an old foe who, you've had some playoff success against. But Dallas is probably riding higher than any team right now in the playoffs because of what I just mentioned. They just beat the two teams that people were picking to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So when you do that, obviously momentum grows, confidence grows. And if you look at that Stars lineup from top to bottom, they're pretty deep. So I'm anxious for this series because I think that both teams match up very well. And I think it's ultimately going to come down to goaltending. Can Ottinger keep playing at the level that he's playing at? And can Skinner keep that momentum going that he's had the last few games, even though he hasn't been tested a lot? The shots that he's getting are all from very, very dangerous, points of the ice. So he's stepped up after kind of faltering in the first few games. But this is going to be an exciting series, and I really think that whoever comes out of the West has an extremely good chance at winning the Cup this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd love to see it too, in the sense that obviously Canadian team had to get eliminated for this to happen, but we've still got a horse in the race here. Edmonton, one of the final four teams, and I think your point as far as it coming down to goaltending, it could be as simple as that, right? Because you match up those two lineups head to head against one another. You can give some slight edges here to one team, some slight advantages to the other team. But really, I think the fact that Ottinger is coming into this as kind of the Conn Smythe dark horse right now, a lot of sports books are kind of updating their odds and saying if Dallas wins it all, it's probably going to go to him just because of how balanced they've been. They're not
Yeah.
leaning on one player to kind of carry them anywhere. So, if they end up winning it all, who do you turn to? Well, the guy between the pipes is traditionally a good selection there. So
the number one center or the goalie is typically the de facto Conn Smythe winner.
Yeah, absolutely. Many a panicked hockey coach in the youth ranks when they had to select the other team's player of the game award. Give it to the goalie, right? So that's come out of more than a few mouths over the years. But I think if Skinner can just limit the bad goals, right? We talked about it already. We don't need to rehash it, but kind of that Grant Fuhr mentality of like just let in one less goal than your team can score.
Yeah.
And that'll be enough to get you there.
And for the love of God, cousin Stu, put your blocker in front of your jersey. You are getting scored on every game in between your blocker and your midsection. Just move your blocker inside a little bit, you'll be fine.
There you go. But I wanted to bring up Bouchard as well too, just because it segues into our next topic so elegantly here, right? Because do you happen to remember where our good friend Mr. Bouchard was drafted from?
I mean, much like it seems 50% of the NHL these days, but the great London Knights of the OHL, who are again representing the OHL in the Memorial Cup, which okay, I was throwing it over to you to finish my sentence there, but you didn't get my cue.
is this weekend? I don't know. Where are you going with this?
Anyways, yes, the Memorial Cup is starting this weekend, and all jokes aside, I mean, yes, Evan Bouchard is obviously on the long list of former London Knight greats that have now donned NHL jerseys and have had a lot of success. But we've got the final four teams set, with the aforementioned London Knights, the Moose Jaw Warriors, the WHL champion, the Drummondville Voltigeurs of the QMJHL.
You rolling your R's and everything, eh?
Mais oui, là. And the hosts, which you don't see very often, the Saginaw Spirit of the OHL. So again, the Memorial Cup being played on U.S. soil for the first time since 1998.
Yeah.
Going to be an interesting one, but what are your initial thoughts on the on the matchups that we've got here with the final four teams?
Oh, well, that's a much less vaguely worded question you're throwing over my way there. So thank you for that.
I'm not going to have you finish any more of my sentences. I thought, by show 20 we'd kind of be at that point, but obviously not.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
We're just a couple of
unless
idiots.
it's on the teleprompter here.
We're just a couple of idiots that are staring blankly at each other.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? These are four very, very deserving teams. And like you alluded to earlier, I mean, it's kind of a coin flip every year of like, is London going to the Memorial Cup or not? It seems like they're a 50-50
Probably.
chance, no matter what. And I mean, before we dissect those other three teams, like just even thinking, whether it's minors, whether it's professional ranks, like it is hard to be at that level of sustained success that the Hunter family has ingrained into the London Knights organization here. And not just going out there and continually, regular season champion, but, maybe fizzled out in the first round or second round or something like that. Like constantly, even the years they're not in the Memorial Cup, it's like lost in game 7 of the OHL, championship, right? And even their quote unquote down years, like they're still pumping out perennial top 10 draft picks. So they've really professionalized and made that organization absolutely top tier, best in class, the envy of the entire CHL from coast to coast. So quick golf clap to the London Knights there for continually bringing it.
And for any of you who haven't noticed, I'm obviously wearing my hometown Sudbury Wolves hat and sweater. And again, it's not by accident that we're talking about this tonight, because Dale Hunter, obviously very famous Sudbury Wolf. So want to give a shout out to a local fella who's done very, very well, and obviously had a great NHL career and probably an even better coaching and management career post playing. So yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. They kind of treat it like a private academy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like when you go play for the London Knights, it's like, oh my God, like they want me to go play for them. Right. Yeah. Like that's the kind of prestige that they've built up. Because like you see some of these other teams build themselves up, like the Erie Otters, like the Windsor Spitfires, like the Kitchener Rangers, Oshawa Generals. And then after 3 to 4 years, they're, kind of leveling out. London is just here all the time. And a lot of people will say, yeah, well, they circumvent the rules. Well, at the end of the day, rules are meant to be circumvented if there's loopholes in them. So,
you're not cheating, you're not trying.
It's the old Eddie Guerrero method, right? You got to cheat to win sometimes. It's not even
cheating. If this stadium security guard is dumb enough to turn around and expose his nightstick to me while doing crowd control, and the ref is simultaneously knocked out, it is not my problem if said nightstick happens to find the head of my opponent.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, some people will say that. I'm just, I look at that as being, look, these guys are very smart with how they understand how to play the game. Mm-hmm. Right? Players want to go play there. They know how to scout players with obviously their many years of not only playing but coaching. And yeah, they understand the laws of continued success, which a lot of teams don't. We've mentioned this many times with many different sports, many different coaches. There's a skill to continued success at any level. And London has found the fountain of success. It's no surprise that they're there representing the OHL once again. And incidentally, I mean, it's funny that Saginaw is the host this year, because who beat Saginaw out in the playoffs this year to get them out? Well, none other than the London Knights. So this is kind of a Saginaw's looking at this. Could we get revenge on the London Knights, or is it shit, we got to play London again? Yeah. And we got to get through that, right? So, I was kind of going through some of the rosters, and it's kind of interesting to see just the level of talent that you have across the board. I mean, the one outlier here is actually Drummondville, because they actually don't have any draft picks on their current roster, nor do they have anybody who's ranked inside the top 3 rounds of the next 2 drafts. So they're probably the most well-balanced team, because they're doing the same things that these other teams are doing. The first time ever we've seen the OHL, the WHL, and the Q all end in sweeps, right? So Drummondville is doing this without any of the huge fanfare of these players that are being developed to go be these NHL stars. That's just a well-balanced team. But, going over, to a team like Moose Jaw, you've got three very high-profile players on their roster. First, Denton Mateychuk, who's obviously a good Ukrainian boy there. He's a 2022 first round pick by the Columbus Blue Jackets. So big defenseman, again, rugged Western hockey leaguer, definitely going to be a successful player at the next level. And then two people that, a lot of Canadian fans probably know very well, Braden Yager, who was a first round pick last year by the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think he represented Canada at the World Juniors, if I'm not mistaken. And again, probably their most high-profile player, Matthew Savoie, who I believe was traded to them mid-season this year for a slew of picks. And he was one of Buffalo's first rounders in 2022. So, they've got some firepower up front with Yeager and Savoie. And then they've also got a big, rugged, blue liner back there in Mateychuk. So, Moose Jaw actually looks pretty primed to have a good run at this year's Cup for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of what's nice, I think, about the four teams who ultimately punched their ticket through to the Memorial Cup this year is they've all got a good blend of star power and kind of draft eligible players here, right? And so you look at, Jackson Unger for Moose Jaw there as well too. Could be potentially the first goalie off the board in 2024 this summer here, right? And Pavel McKenzie as well too. He's going to be kind of that day 2 type pick, but he's, depending on what scouting service you're looking at, he's kind of in that 150-ish range there. So again, they've got some solid prospects on top of what you already listed there as well. And I think it really is nice to kind of see, other than London, who's just always going to be there apparently, but it's not the same old as far as, some of these teams that are mortgaging their future to go out there and acquire the Savoy. Like it's not just, oh yeah, some future considerations and 2 or 3 players. Like for those who don't know how these minor hockey deals work, it's like take our next 12 first rounders plus second rounders. Like it's just a laundry list of trade assets that these teams put out there to try and get them over the hump, because they know it's a churn and burn league. You've only got these kids for a finite amount of time. So if you've got a window to actually go out there and put your hand on some hardware, like you got to take it, right? And so I really like the way that their roster is constructed. I really like Saginaw as well too, where had it not been for the aforementioned Knights, like this is a team that probably could have won the entire OHL championship there,
For
right?
sure.
You look at some of their players that they've already got on their roster, like they've kind of got a who's who as far as who's already been drafted in terms of, you got Owen Beck from Montreal, you've got Josh Bloom for Vancouver, you've got Jorian Donovan for Ottawa. So, and those are just the Canadian team drafted players there. They got a whole bunch more that have also been selected down south of the border. But again, they've got some that are very highly thought of for this draft in Zane Perrick. But they've the person that I've kind of got my eye on isn't actually for this year's draft.
2025,
Mr. Michael Misa. And I think he is going to be one that, if you're not already familiar with his game, if you're a fan of hockey, get familiar with it, because good old Bob McKenzie with his, quasi-retired, but 4 times a year I'm going to hop on for some draft specials. He's going to be talking about this kid ad nauseum, and he's going to be at the top of a lot of scouting lists. So I'm really interested to see, because especially if you kind of follow the trajectory of the McDavids, the Bedards, some of these guys, like it's not even always their draft year that's the most impressive, because at that point you kind of think like, okay, they're who they should be at this point, and they're as advertised. Like right now, the year before the year, that's always where I like to kind of take a look at them and then compare this to next year. Did they take that next step? Did he plateau? Did he actually take a step backwards? So I'm curious to see how he plays against some really top level competition this weekend.
100%. And he was the top of my list too, because you talk about firepower. Owen Beck is, he was one person that Montreal was actually mentioning of, infusing some juice into their lineup this year. So you think about him going back to play at the junior level, this guy's been dominant pretty much all year, right? So now you've got him as kind of that, veteran leader. He's kind of the spark plug behind what drives Saginaw. But then, with Michael Misa, yeah, you put him in the same category as who you just mentioned, right? And this is exactly the point. You see a guy who goes onto this big stage. Can he perform when he's not supposed to? Right? He's supposed to perform next year when he's the guy. This year, he's okay. Can he take that next step up and compete against the Braden Yeagers, Matthew Savoys, the Easton Cowans? Like, can he become that next level prospect that vaults him into that first overall stratosphere? So I'm interested to see that too. I think that he's got all the potential in the world. And yeah, you love to see these high profile players get this opportunity to play on the grandest stage. And, obviously I just mentioned one of London's, glut of prospects that they've got. But yeah, the four guys on London that, I'm really looking forward to watching. Three of which have already been drafted and one of which is going in to be a top prospect in this draft. So you're looking at on defense, Oliver Bonk, who all Ottawa fans should know very well, son of former Senators great, let's just say.
One of the greatest mullets in Senators history.
But son of Radek Bonk, drafted last year in the first round by Philadelphia. I mean, he's smooth. If you watch this guy play, like, he's such a good skater. He's going to have success to the next level, and this is the type of player where I think everyone expects to kind of be the Evan Bouchard of the Memorial Cup this year, right? Like, kind of the leader of the defense scoring, and being the all eyes on me type of player. Mentioned Easton Cowan already. Toronto obviously gets a lot more hype around their prospects than most teams, so there's going to be a ton of eyes on him. And then another one who's actually a Finnish prospect, who's another second round pick from last year, Kasper Halttunen. Again, there's been a litany of Finnish players coming through the junior ranks in the last few years, and this is kind of the next guy up. So you look at those three players in particular from last year. I mean, whenever you have three players from one team drafted in the first two rounds, you're doing something pretty well. Right. And I'm not even mentioning, many of the other guys that have gone or are on the prospect list. But I think the one guy who, again, you talk about the Michael Nieces of the world, the next guy's up who you're really looking to take, that step forward, Sam Dickinson. He's he's a defenseman going into this year's draft, so he's eligible for 2024. But again, London is renowned for just absolutely pumping out NHL defenseman after NHL defenseman after NHL defenseman. I already mentioned Oliver Bonk. Sam Dickinson could be a better prospect than Oliver Bonk is. So, this is the type of tournament that can actually put him in that conversation to be a top 5, top 10 pick potentially. Because again, it's not exactly a home run slam dunk. This is happening in the top 10. So you can see a guy like that sneak in if he has a good enough tournament and competes at a high enough level.
Yeah. And, right now, currently ranked as number 7 as far as North American skaters on Central Scouting Services. So, yeah, there's certainly a world in which he could flirt with a top 5 pick for sure. And, it all depends on how teams kind of value the skill set that he brings to the table. But there's another Sam in London as well too that we shouldn't be overlooking there, and that's Mr. O'Reilly, who is currently number 24 on the Central Scouting list. And so we could literally sit here and just run through their entire roster and be like, all right, either projected first round pick or was a first round pick. Like, such is the riches that the London Knights organization gets to choose from here. But I mean, tying it all in together to what we were talking about before with London is, it's one thing to identify talent, but we have seen countless examples of, the media, fans, everyone falling over themselves to crown people. Why even bother play the regular season? Like, these guys are going to be the champs, only for them to fall absolutely flat on their face, right? Like, I don't know how many Sports Illustrated covers had Steve Nash and Dwight Howard in Lakers uniforms saying, "Give them the title now." And that was probably
Yeah.
one of their worst seasons out on the West Coast in recent memory. So it's one thing to assemble and identify talent. It's another thing to bring the right type of people into that
Yeah.
dressing room that aren't going to have egos, that aren't going to throw off the chemistry, that are still going to be team first players, not me first players. And when you're talking about guys that are wanting to go in the first round, again, we're not talking about some fringe, non-power five conference school there where it's like we've got one NFL draft prospect and the rest of us are, just happy to be here. Like, every single guy on that roster has the same aspirations and this pretty similar skill set. So kudos to them for really being able to bring this roster together and continually get them to gel. But yeah, it's an absolute murderer's row. I mean, going into the tournament, I have to, label them as my pre-tournament selection to win it all. And if I had to kind of power rank them there, I think it's probably, you're going to see London. You're probably going to see, I'm flipping back and forth between Saginaw and Moose Jaw ears. I'll say London, and then let's throw the WHL champs in there for the final. And I think, unfortunately, our Voltigeur friends are just going to be in a little bit over their head this year.
Yeah, and I actually have the same final with London and Moose Jaw, but I have Moose Jaw with the upset win over London.
Oh, anything
So
can happen in those one gamers, eh?
exactly. So I like Saginaw's chances to rattle some cages and make a run, but yeah, London's just too strong top to bottom. But yeah, for some reason, I watched some Moose Jaw highlights over the last little bit, and they just play such a good brand of hockey. And it's just these are the types of tournaments where you see teams like this, again, assert their will and potentially, steal some wins from teams that they potentially don't match up as well with in a regular season format. So, yeah, give me Moose Jaw to win the 2024 Mem Cup.
Yeah. Wow. I was going to say, anytime I hear Saginaw anything, and it's been off the air for like 30 years, I instantly flash back to Home Improvement there, where one of the Tool Time sponsors was Saginaw cheese. Cheese, it's good.
And the funny part is that I know where that reference is from, and I hate myself for it because why I can't remember certain things that I really need, but I remember things like that. Who knows? But yeah,
where did I put my
show.
car keys? I have no idea. But yeah, obscure Tim Allen reference from 1993. Fire me up here.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, we're talking about, one of Canada's most prestigious hockey tournaments. And, it's a good segue into another one of the topics that we want to speak about tonight, which is the Canadian men's basketball roster.
Yes,
so
sir.
Recently had the now eliminated Denver Nuggets star Jamal Murray declare that he will be representing Canada at the next Olympics, which is obviously music to any Canadian basketball fans' ears because he was kind of the outlier of, he's one of the stars that hadn't, put his, name in the ring yet. And now he's officially made a declaration. So wanted to have a conversation just to say, look, with everyone that's kind of come through the program the last, let's say, 2 years and really built it up to a point of being an Olympic contender now, let's just bandy about some names of what a potential Canadian roster can look like for the next Olympics and maybe the next 2 Olympics. Because we mentioned this many a time, both on the men's and women's side, it's never been as deep when it comes to the pool of selected players here. So the fact that we've got NBA players who will be cut is such a great problem to now have that, look, we can go to half the teams in the league and say, you can actually have a player that's coming to our training camp. You can have a player that's coming to our training camp. And this grows excitement. It grows buzz. And I think that, again, after their world championship performance, Canada's on a lot of teams' radars now as being one of those upset specials that can potentially make a run for, a bronze, silver, or maybe even a gold medal.
No. Well, that's just it, right? Is like look at how far this program has come over the last couple of decades where it used to be, oh, please, baby Jesus, let Steve Nash play for Team Canada so we have one kind of star that we can watch there. And oh, good, we got Jamal McGlure committed to us and whatnot. But now it legitimately is. We're cutting NBA players from it. We're not begging for them to show up anymore. And that was
Mhm.
always kind of the fight as far as there have been Canadian players in the NBA, but even those that have been there have been reluctant to put their names forward, not because they don't want to represent their country, but because of kind of the state of, all right, I'm there. Who else am I playing with? Right? Because I'm not going to go out there and risk injury, blowing out my knee here, for Canadian pride if we're going to get run out of the gym by 60 points against LeBron and the boys here every single time.
Yeah.
So this is a really, really pivotal summer for the Canadian program. And I think you're going to see this trickle down to the grassroots level as well, too, here, as far as when you're seeing all these kids this summer watching all these NBA and WNBA players represent the red and white on the biggest stage of them all. Like, get ready for a lot of house league and competitive tryouts and all of that in the fall. But I look at this roster here and I think they are absolutely loaded at the guard position. I think that they are going to be one of the most annoying teams to play against defensively when you
Yep.
think of, all right, there's going to be Dylan Brooks out there, there's going to be Lou Dort, there's going to be, some of these defensive specialists. You just had Jamal Murray in one of his post-game interviews saying like, hey, I just told Nikhil Alexander Walker there, like, you better be guarding the other team like this summer here, like you were just guarding me. So they're going to be, I kind of liken them to the early 2000s like East European block teams there, where they're not going to go out there and put up 150 points and turn this into a track meet with you. They are going to be picking you up full court, making you earn every single inch on that court, and absolutely harassing ball carriers, blowing up screens, setting hard screens on the other end, knocking people down. For those that ever watched, the Dream Team documentary there, where they kind of handed it over to the new crew there, and there's Carmelo, and you got Chris Paul and LeBron and all these young guys, and Kobe Bryant is kind of the,
Yep.
the lone holdout there, and he says, first play of the game, Pau Gasol, who at the time was his Lakers teammate, is going to sit at the high screen at the elbow here. You guys just be ready for it. First play of the game, and Kobe turns into Ray Lewis and just blows up Pau Gasol to the point where everyone in the gym kind of went like, "Oh my god!" And like he set the tone for that team. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think it's going to be a superstar like a Jamal Murray or a SGA who's going to be kind of that tone setter. I think it's going to be kind of unsung heroes like Captain Canada, Kelly Olynyk, or one of the defenders we just listed there who might not put in 20 points but holds the other team's best player to 8 points that game and makes life
Yeah.
miserable for them. So get ready for some very ugly basketball, but get ready for a team that can absolutely hang with any other roster that any of the other nations put out there in front of them.
Yeah, 100%. Like you mentioned annoying, you mentioned, tenacious defense. Yeah, I look at the athleticism
Mm-hmm.
that you're looking at from, and you said you're going to be loaded at guard. Like I think they're loaded with the first three positions with point guard, shooting guard, and small forward.
And
Like
young
they
players too, not
and
just
young
players
players.
that are on their way out, but that'll be
That's what I'm
there for
saying.
a
Like
few years.
they can get up and down the court with anybody. They
Mm-hmm.
can run with anybody. They can jump with anybody. So I mean, I think you match up probably better than anybody, against a team like the US with your backcourt and your small forward combination. It's where you kind of creep into the power forward center,
Yeah.
mix. That's where you see some deficiencies there. But at the same time, you've seen it in the past. You can have one of these, big plotting guys who's just back there to be that big body, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put a, put a forearm into whoever's playing center for the US or Argentina or one of the other traditional powers. Or you can go small.
Yeah.
And you can play a guy, like a Brandon Clark or even a Dylan Brooks at center,
Yeah.
right? And you just have that annoying lineup that's just, everywhere across the board, you've got length, you've got anyone can bring up the ball, anyone can shoot the three, and you really just create those matchup nightmares. Because I mean, do you want to be the country who has a 7-foot center who can't really move up and down the court, trying to not only defend but play offense against Dylan Brooks, who never stops moving and is never going to stop like slapping you, pulling your shorts, like doing all those annoying things that you hate?
Yeah.
They're going to substitute that guy out in 2 seconds. So I kind of like the fact that they've got a small ball lineup, because it does actually suit them for what they're strong at. And I mean, just kind of going over some names. You mentioned, the big ones already, but again, at guard, we've got the SGA, we've got Jamal Murray, we've got Lou Dort, we've got Andrew Nemhard and Nickeil Alexander Walker, who are kind of those are the locked and loaded, people I think are no brainers going to be on the team no matter what.
Yeah. And then depending on what you think of the outlook of RJ Barrett, is he a guard? Is he a small forward?
And this is where I'm going with that too. Now you look at those guys who have a little bit more length that can play that small forward position. You're looking at RJ Barrett, Andrew Wiggins, Benedict Mathurin, and then Shadon Sharp. So now
Shaden?
You're looking at is it Shaden Shadon?
Yeah. See, it's good. It's hockey players for me. It's basketball players for
Basketball
you.
players for me.
Look at us, the hive mindset of the
Yeah.
two of us there. Between the two of us, we'll get there eventually, though.
Whatever. S Sharp. But you look at those four players, and I mean, they could play shooting guard in a pinch.
Yeah.
They can play small forward. They all could also, again, take some minutes and play a small ball power forward if need be. So, the fact that now you've got the depth at guard, the depth at small forward, you're actually looking very, very promising. So then you go to, the forward positions. And I mean, I look at Dylan Brooks. He's probably the starting power forward. He's probably playing power forward for the entire tournament, because that's what they need him to do. Brandon Clark, I mentioned him already, again, turned into a very good role player for Memphis. And ultimately, again, he brings the size you don't really have. He's 6'9". Again, could be that stretch, the stretch four, or he could play center, depending on the lineup. And then you've got the three big bodies that you can look at bringing down there. So again, you mentioned Kelly Olynyk, Captain Canada. He's definitely going to be on the team. Just in
Even
how
has
much
the same haircut as Ryan Smith used to have as well.
Absolutely. 100%. And I mean, I think that he's such a good locker room presence for that team too, that you kind of want him to be there.
Yeah.
Again, another Team Canada staple, Dwight Powell. He give you some meaningful minutes off the bench if you need him, but he's ultimately not going to be a factor. And if he is, you're probably not competing for a medal. And then there's the wild card, Zach Edey.
Can't teach size.
You can't teach size, and there aren't many 7'4" guys, especially ones who can move like he can. And at the end of the day, you're a 2-time NCAA Player of the Year for a reason. Pretty damn good player. So, those are 15 names that you look at what Team Canada could potentially be, and obviously you got to cut it down to 12 and have 3 taxi squad players. But that's a very strong lineup. Not even including some of the also rans, some of the up and coming NCAA players. Those are just some guys that I think people know, that people understand can play at a high level because they're in the NBA. And yeah, they could form a very, very formidable lineup going into 2024 and then 2028.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like you said there too. And then we haven't even talked about some of the players that are probably on the list, but aren't ultimately going to make it, right? Like a Corey Joseph, who, 8 years ago, we would have, opened whatever kind of backroom deals we could have to get him on the team. And, Kem Birch and O'Shea Brissett and like
Tristan
legitimate
Thompson.
Yeah, exactly. Legitimate NBA players who play meaningful minutes aren't just, the guy who never takes off his track pants at the end of the bench here. So it shows you the development of this program. But yeah, everyone that we've run through and kind of that tenacity and that just annoying to play against, those were the teams that for the longest time gave Canada fits, especially in, the FIBA against like Brazil, Argentina, Puerto
Yeah.
Rico, some Central American teams there. Like those are literally the teams who we would be like, all right, so in order to qualify for the Olympics, we just got to go down there and whatever, beat Honduras. Okay, no problem. And then you would check the box score and they lost by 8. And it's like, oh my God, like how do you lose that? Because these are the types of players that just absolutely drive you insane, are throwing elbows, are making you, when the ref's not looking, not doing dirty things, but like literally making you feel their presence for the entirety of the game. And
Yeah.
so for Canada to finally have a lineup that can go toe to toe skill wise, that can go toe to toe defense, can go toe to toe as far as the tenacity they're bringing to the court with any other country on the planet, is an exciting, exciting time for Canadians to be watching Olympic basketball. And I mean, it's going to be the marquee event of the summer, right? Because even
Yeah.
when you look at kind of the bigger picture, right? Like, is it LeBron's last Olympics? The continual Canada USA, are they going to have this big showdown? You've got France, who is just pumping out. I don't know if there's a lab or something over there where they're just pumping out all of these unbelievable, like 7'1" freaks of nature that can dunk, play
France,
defense.
who's giving citizenship to everybody.
Yeah, well, hey, it's London Knights there. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. So, but honestly, there's going to be so much star power, and I was busting your balls on it because he's my name to watch is Shaden Sharp at
Yeah.
these Olympics, for the simple reason that, number one, it's going to be injury related, because for those that have followed the NBA, obviously he was battling some nagging injuries down the stretch there. So number one, he has to be medically cleared to go. If he is cleared to go, and again, for those that don't know, unbelievable talent, can jump out
Yeah.
of the gym, honest to God, is probably the best in-game dunker in the entire NBA that people aren't talking about, was
Mhm.
supposed to, not this year, but last year, be in the NBA dunk contest. But because he didn't get named to the Rising Stars game, his camp was like, well, you can't have it both ways here, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
not Mac McClung here who's just happy to be there. Either put us in the friggin' Rising Stars thing and we'll do this, or not. NBA wouldn't accommodate it, and you ended up with a pretty crappy dunk competition. I think there is a potential, put it up on the bulletin board right now, where you see literally a Vince Carter moment where Shaden Sharp just absolutely does something that blows people's minds and ends up on Sports Center for the next 6 months on repeat as far as
Yeah.
web gem highlights.
Yeah. And he was on my list of players that I was going to say, because Canada, like you just mentioned, they've got their scoring, right? They can score with anybody. They've got two of the best scorers in the NBA currently right now, who's going to make up their backcourt. You've got depth, you've got youth, you've got veteran experience, and I mean good veteran experience, because again, these guys are all not only members of the Canadian national team for multiple events, but yeah, they're all playing in the NBA for multiple years. Then you've also got these wild card players that people don't really have a grasp on how good they actually are, with Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nemhard, and Shaden Sharp.
Yeah.
Those are three guys that I think could be absolute energy players that you bring in off the bench, that you put in with a Lou Dort.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be a hell of a second unit.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about, giving teams nightmares with their athleticism and their ability to just get underneath people's skin because they're worried about something big happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 100%. I'm so excited to watch this team kind of get named, unveiled, and then take the court, because this is something that we've never seen in our lifetime. And you know how excited Canada gets when they name the men's hockey team, the women's hockey team. Now we're at a point where we're naming the men's soccer teams, the women's soccer teams. We get excited about it. We're at a point now where the basketball programs are better than ever. Canada basketball and Canada basketball fans are going to be so excited when we get the final roster's name for the women's team and the men's team. This is going to be a very, very special games for those who like the round ball.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, just such a shame Masai couldn't pry away Benedict Mathurin or Andrew Nemhard in the ill-fated Pascal trade. But moving right along.
And there's Kyle's standard shot at Masai every episode. So for those counting at home, he probably got that about 17 of the 20 episodes so far.
I'm nothing if not consistent.
You are very consistent. I will give
the
you
Cal
that.
Ripken of this podcast episode here.
Oh yeah, there you go. I'm the Reggie Jackson. I'm just a big thinker who, if I'm not going to hit a home run, I'm striking out. So
big swings are happening though. But that's a good segue into our next topic. There,
you'd think that we plan these things because we do.
Yeah.
But anyways,
yeah, well, but based on our ability to just have dead air staring at each other within the episode, I think we've proven otherwise. But
yes.
Yeah, the beloved Blue Jays, who can't say we didn't try to warn them with their lack of off-season moves, but I think we're starting to see the fruits of that inaction kind of sour on this team. And I think we were both talking off air as well too, as far as something needs to happen, whether it's a trade, whether it's a firing, whether it's a promotion, whether it's some sort of shakeup needs to get this team out of its current funk. So we were thinking, all right, what is one big move that you would make that would kind of reset the Jays' optimism for heading into the All-Star break and then hopefully a second half push? So in your infinite wisdom, when you were putting your homework assignment together here, what is the big move that you would be making to get the Bluebirds back into the right side of the win column here?
I think I know where you're going, so I'm going to go with my other one. So I'm going to go the trade route.
Okay.
And I look at their current lineup, and the inconsistency is just maddening.
Yeah.
Right? They're putting up 9 runs one game, and then they get shut out for 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
They've almost been no hit, I think, 6 or 7 times this year. Their big bats aren't big, right? Like Vlad, Bo, George Springer, Justin Turner's cooled off since the last time we spoke about him. They really haven't had any consistency at the plate. Their pitching started out slow, starting to round into form now where you're seeing more consistency from their starting staff. Their bullpen's kind of leaky, but again, the bullpens typically take shape around the All-Star break. So now you're going to start to see kind of, how they're going to round out there. I look at some trends around the MLB, and I look at some teams that are struggling and in the same boat as Toronto right now. They're looking for a jolt. They're looking for something to get themselves out of the funk that they're in. And I think a prime candidate, because we've seen some of the things happening recently with the way that their manager has been handling things in the media, addressing certain positions, is the Miami Marlins.
Mm-hmm.
Skip Schumacher just came out and called out 2 of their top 3 starting pitchers right after they finished because they were inconsistent. And he's like, we can't win games if they can't get out of the 3rd inning without giving up 4 or 5 runs. And it's true, right? So I think with the way that they look at baseball, from the analytical side, pitching is obviously something that, they're very high on. And the guys that they've relied on have not been reliable. So if I'm Toronto, I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling Miami because there's one guy on their roster who fits so many needs. He's versatile. He can come in and be your locked and loaded second baseman or center fielder. He's a left-handed bat. He brings tons of charisma. He can steal bases and he can hit for power. Jazz Chisholm is the guy that I'd be targeting if I'm Toronto. What I'd want to give up, hey, we've got some pitching that you can obviously, take a phone call on. I think the people that would be probably more interesting to Miami with their current makeup, I mean, I'm looking at maybe a pairing of Kikuchi and Nate Pearson. Kikuchi with the veteran steady presence, still only 32 years old. He's a lefty. He's kind of had a career resurgence the last 2 years. And Nate Pearson hasn't really worked out as a starter. Now his relief, appearances have been kind of shaky, but he still possesses all the tools you want for a team that is looking to bank on potential, still only 26 years old. So you look at those 2 guys out of the bullpen, and then, how do we make it work, with with the bat side of things. I mean, any prospect not named Aurelvis Martinez, I think, should be on the table right now. Because if you can get a guy back like a Chisholm, who's only 25 years old, and gives you all those things I just mentioned, you got to look at that and explore it. Because look, unless you're trading Bo, unless you're trading Vlad, not really many movable assets on this roster right now. So you got to probably bring in somebody who's going to help, these other guys kind of pick up the slack and kind of take over as that lead dog in that clubhouse. And I think Jazz Chisholm could be the guy.
Yeah. And it's almost like a broken clock at this point where every year we get to this point here and it's all right, can we poach someone from the Miami Marlins? And they seem to be the one club that doesn't matter whether the Blue Jays are running away with the division or are at the absolute bottom of it. It's all right, let's take a phone call down to them and see where their head's at. I mean, I can definitely see the desirability of bringing in a Jazz Chisholm there, where add some youth to the lineup, add some speed to the lineup. To me, it would kind of be the same as calling up Aurelvis Martinez at this point. They're kind of a similar player, but we've also seen some holes within that infield where you want to do both. Why not? Right? Because we're quickly entering a point of the season where if they don't start stringing some wins together, that doesn't matter. You guys are going to be playing meaningless baseball once August rolls around. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on there. I think absolutely right. It's probably going to be a bat if they do end up making a trade because it's their offense that has been struggling, right? And there's only so long the Kikuchis of the world and Barrioses of the world that can keep putting together these strong, 6 inning, 7 inning outings, but you're only giving them 2 runs of offense. Well, there's only so many times they can either pitch a shutout or hold the other team to 1 run here. So it
Yep.
has to come on that front. Do I think the Marlins are really that interested in taking on someone on the other side of 30 in Kikuchi? Probably not. So it's probably going to be, mostly a farm system kind of raid that they would do. And to your point, I think anyone kind of not named Tiedemann or Martinez, have at her at this point, right? You
Yeah.
want to grab 5 and hope that one of them pans out, which is kind of the Marlins MO of late. They kind of oscillate between, oh, we somehow have this small window where we're competing, we snuck into the playoffs, blow it up. Oh, you already saw
Yeah.
it happen multiple times. Win the World Series, blow it up. So,
Yeah, and like they've already traded a guy like Luis Arias,
yeah,
who was flirting with 400 all of last year. And I mean, like I said, I think with the way that Skip Schumacher views that lineup, the way that he wants to play baseball, I don't see Jazz Chisholm's personality working with him.
no,
So, I think that it's a prime candidate. And yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, would they want to take on a pitcher like Kikuchi? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, like I said, he's pitching well enough now, and he's still probably got 3 to 4 good years of baseball left. So those guys are valuable, right? And bottom of the order pitcher who can give you 6, 7 strong innings every time he's out there, and has a sub 3 ERA. Hey, lefties get paid, man.
yeah.
They do.
Well,
Um,
that's just it. They don't grow on trees, but does that supersede or I guess run, in the face of what Miami's trying to do, which is probably
for
bottom
sure.
out, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so I think a guy like Pearson might be attractive to them because they can view him as a potential starter or maybe future closer for them. But yeah, like I said, anybody in the farm system, I'd even put Tiedemann on the table, to be honest, because they've got a couple of people who they've drafted the last few years who are now showing some progression to be those next pitchers in their in their prospect pool. So I mean, even a guy like Tiedemann, if it brings back one of these all-star caliber players who is young enough that you still have controllable years of,
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at that,
Yeah.
right? Because again, pitchers, as highly as they can be projected, how many do we see flame out because of either elbow, shoulder problems, or they struggle when they get to the big leagues? I mean, Tiedemann looks like he's a pretty sure prospect coming up, but hey, for the right player coming back that can really inject some life into this listless offense, I think you got to look at it. And like I said, anybody outside of Elvis Martinez, hey, have a look. Let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's just it too, right? Is the logic is sound as far as if you're going to make that trade, make it now, though. This isn't a
Yeah.
trade you make
Oh,
at the
for
trade
sure.
deadline because by then you're too late, right? Turn this season around. And that leads me to my point, which
There we go.
I'm sure you probably already know where I'm going with this. I swear I don't have it out for every GM or coach or anything like that in the majors. There's actually quite a few who I will use as shining examples from time to time. Ross Atkins is not one of those individuals, however. So my suggestion isn't just Atkins, it's Atkins plus the analytics department. And the reason I lump those two together is what the eyeball test is glaringly telling you is not being put into place. And they are stubbornly sticking with the sabermetrics, the deep analytics, the every single advanced Harvard mathematical degree that you need to be able to friggin' compute these statistics here. They are way too reliant on that. And they've taken every aspect of feel out of the game. The other night was a perfect example. George Springer is a great player. I'm not saying take him out of the lineup. What I am saying is he probably shouldn't be hitting in the first or second spot too much more this season, right? If you're resting someone else, sure, put him up there. At this stage of his career, he's sort of a 6 hitter to me in my mind there. And look at that. We bumped Danny Jansen up in the lineup. We did something different, and he goes out and has probably the best offensive game of the season for, forget just a catcher, any Blue Jays player. So again, if they would just take that and run with it, all right, see your project through. But you have to realize that Atkins got brought in December of 2015. So this is after they had already lost in the ALCS. Okay. 2016, he's inherited that team, right? So they go to the ALCS once again, end up losing there as well, too. So he kind of falls ass backwards into the kind of Encarnacion, Joey Bats, team that ended up going on these deep playoff runs. And since then, would you venture a guess how many, not series, how many playoff games they have won since flaming out in ALCS? You are absolutely correct, sir. 3 playoff appearances, 3 sweeps. So
Yeah.
forget the Toronto Maple Leafs running joke of can't get past the first round. Like, at least they win games in the first round series. They have not won a playoff game since 2016. And who
Yeah.
has been the GM that entire time? Ross Atkins. So
Yeah.
at a certain point, we just did an episode of, hey, if you're a coach that makes it through your entire contract and gets re-signed, like you're probably one of the longest tenured people here. Forget people that are going to be lifers with organizations. We're now approaching a decade that he has been at the helm of this franchise here. And the results have not panned out. This is not a small market club that is running on a shoestring budget here. We are not the Oakland Athletics, whose payroll is 1/10 of half the other teams in the entire league here. You've got deep telecoms budget money here that you can
Yeah.
go out and sign whoever you want. You were this close to signing Ohtani for probably $500 million, right? But did it come to fruition? No. And did you have a backup plan? No. And now we see where we're at. So now that we're already here, all right, these are the guys you got to run with. Are we adjusting over the course of the season? No. What did he just go out there and say in his press conference? Oh, I believe in this core. We're going to turn it around here. Listen, if you don't turn it around, it would be an insult to a lot of Blue Jays fans if Atkins was still at the helm next year, if it's just a whole bunch more lip service. So it's not just Atkins and the analytics department. I believe in analytics. They have a role to play, but they should not be dictating baseball decisions when they are running completely opposite to what the eyeball test is telling you.
Yeah. It has to go hand in hand. You have to have a balance of it. And I think that too many people got caught up in the Moneyball, in the Moneyball era. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just bought into it 100% wholeheartedly without even
everyone thinking. Wants Brad Pitt to play them in a movie.
Yeah. And I mean, incidentally, you see the Cleveland, franchise represented in that movie right away, right? And that they employed a lot of that analytics hypothetical, approach, because that's obviously where Billy Beane got his inspiration from. So, I mean, you look at Mark Shapiro, obviously he's not part of the baseball decisions very much anymore. He's more involved in, the stadium upgrades and making sure that the team has a future and the lease with the city and everything. Like that's more his, his foray right now.
Which, you know what? Just so people realize that I do give people their flowers. If you haven't been to a Blue Jays game in the
It
last
looks
year or two,
phenomenal.
complete night and day from the
Yeah.
green carpet in a parking lot that it used to be. Like, jokes aside, it was the worst, and I'm including Tropicana Field here. It used to be the worst baseball atmosphere in the major leagues by a country mile, and they have really done a good job at that. So there you go. Kudos to the renovations.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, Ross Atkins is the Mark Shapiro guy. So does that mean that he's got job security as long as Shapiro's there? Who knows?
Well, we just
The
saw
way,
Brendan Shanahan still there with the Leafs, but everyone underneath them got cleared out.
This is true. So I look at what you're saying and I take it a step further, where I say, you know what? Obviously, the Schneider, managerial, tenure is not working as well as you hoped it would when you gassed Charlie Montoyo and called him up from the minors. So, I think that along with what you're saying, you have to take a long, hard look at the way that this team is being managed on a day-to-day basis. You've got a perfect manager already on your coaching staff who I think could step in and do an absolutely dynamite job if given the opportunity to kind of handle things and give him the reins fully, with Don Mattingly, right? You elevate him to the manager, and then it's like, hey, Wade Boggs, what are you doing? Do you want to come and work with our hitters for the rest of the year? Let's try and get, these guys out of, what they're doing. And, that's kind of where you have to go. Cause like, obviously their hitting coach, I don't know who it is, ain't working. Yeah. Schneider ain't working. So if you reshuffle,
Boggsy's got to take him on a cross-country flight to Seattle there and
just
get
gonna
everyone
say,
sorted out.
just gonna say, gonna have to eat a whole chicken and drink 52 beers on a cross-country flight. But no, but again, like, I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm also somewhat serious when I say it. Like, when you're a person who's played the game and understands the nuances of contact on a baseball, not to say that power isn't a thing, but if I look at a guy like Don Mattingly, can't think of a better example of, hey, if I'm a young guy and I'm listening to a guy like Don Mattingly teach me the finer points of hitting a baseball, probably going to listen to him a little bit more. Probably going to respect what he's saying a little bit more. Now, if he gets the run and he gets to bring in his own hitting coach, yeah, hey, I played with Wade Boggs for years. What are you doing, man? I don't need you to be the full-time hitting coach. Come in and work with our guys.
Yeah.
I'll bring in a guy who can be the full everyday guy, but just come on home trips. Put you up in the hotel, bar tab on me. Just teach your guys how to swing a baseball bat. So that's kind of where I look at taking it the next step further. So yes, Atkins I think needs to go. The analytics department needs to get a full shake up, because obviously the way that they're viewing analytics is flawed. But now you can kind of shuffle up some deck chairs and kind of put people in the right positions on that coaching staff that can really make them become the type of team that they should be. So
I love it. You're usually the glass half full guy, and I'm usually, all right, you got to clean house, you got to do this, that. And here I am. I'm like, you know what? Ross Atkins in the analytics department. I'll stop there. I don't want people to start typecasting me as Debbie Downer of this episode. And you're coming in over the top ropes here. Flamethrower the whole thing down. I love it. Welcome to the side. I've got room for you on my couch here, bud.
Yeah, but like I said, I think that there's a time and place for these types of things, and this is really it, because you just hit all the perfect points. Almost a decade, playoff futility, swings and misses in free agency. How has your drafting been? Is your farm system any better than what it was when you inherited it? Because obviously Anthopoulos kind of tore that to the ground to build up that team for that 2015 run. So I look at where the Blue Jays are right now. Are they one of the deeper clubs across the MLB? No. Are they one of the most stacked prospect pipelines in the MLB? No. Do they have one of the largest payrolls in the MLB? I think they're kind of mediocre. They're not really at that point of the deep spenders like the Yankees and Cubs and Red Sox, but you know, they're on the cusp and they could be.
And then at the tip of the pyramid, you have the Los Angeles Dodgers.
I'm not even mentioning the
billions.
Dodgers. Yeah, the Dodgers and Mets are in such a different stratosphere. I'm not even going to mention them. But yeah, I mean, you're in the opportunity right now where you're 22 and 25. I mean, you're still 3 games under 500. It's not the end of the world, but like you just mentioned, if you're going to do something, don't wait until the trade deadline. Do it now, so that way at least you have some time to see where you're at the trade deadline to determine whether you're going to be a seller and improve your prospect pipeline, or you're going to be a team that say, you know what, we put a good run here. Maybe we can challenge for that wild card team. And going into the playoffs, I like our chances more with an updated coaching staff or a deeper lineup with a guy like a Chisholm or whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, call up Martinez, make Davis Schneider an everyday player, get George Springer out of the outfield and let him just be a DH every now and again just to give him some rest, because maybe that's what he needs. Guy's getting old. You need a little bit more time to recover. So you went out and got all these different depth pieces. Well, let them play the field more. Put Biggio in the outfield more to give Kiermaier a break, so he's not an everyday center fielder. Like, again, I'm not a baseball mastermind, but these are just simple things you can do. So if you can't see it when you're there every day and you're working with this team, I don't know what else to tell you, because the holes are glaring and they're obvious. So there's got to be something that gets done here, and whether Atkins takes the bull by the horns and does it himself, then yeah, he's got to be the one that's that big, the big move that kind of shakes things up for sure.
Yeah. If he can't see the writing on the wall that either a big change needs to come from him or the big change is going to be him, then he probably shouldn't be in that position to begin with at this point.
No. But anyways, enough of our Blue Jays doom and gloom that we seem to cover every time we talk about them. But yeah, one last little tidbit that you wanted to discuss tonight and kind of celebrate, because very cool thing happening out in the East Coast.
Yeah, so the mighty booming metropolis that is Prince Edward Island is going to be actually hosting an NCAA Div 1 tournament coming up. So in 2025, the island is going to be descended upon by 4 teams. It's going to be a nice little 4-team showdown. Don't believe they finalized the teams yet. I think 2 of them have committed at this point, but always love kind of seeing these mid-season kind of little tournaments there that pop up there before teams start getting into conference play and all of that. There's all sorts of examples. Some of the more prestigious ones there, the Maui Invitational, there's ones down in Bahamas now and all of that, and those are where some of the Dukes and Kentuckys and all of that of the world go to spend some I guess team building time, we'll call it, there before they get into the depths of their schedules. But this is going to be a cool little experience, and we already talked about how the East Coast shows up for events like this, and how we were really hoping that the whole saga with the Growlers and that team folding, and even on the basketball side, that team folding as well too, wasn't going to dissuade people from coming out east, and clearly it hasn't. So yeah, nice little basketball tournament heading out to Prince Edward Island there.
I have to get friend of the show Mike Moriali to hook us up with some tickets to that event, because that would be something to watch for sure. So yeah, keep an eye on that, because that's a really cool thing, and hit the nail on the head. The East Coast is a favorable destination for a lot of tourists for a reason. The atmosphere, the people, and obviously they've got a very big love for sporting events out there. So this kind of hits all the major boxes that you want to see for something like this. So yeah, wish them all the best in organizing this one of a kind tournament that they're going to be having out there, and hopefully we can see more of them happen across the country, because I think that's a great way to keep the momentum going with what we just talked about earlier with Canada basketball.
Now, Ole Miss and Georgetown heading up there. So if you want to be one of the other 2 teams, hit up the organizers there out in Charlottetown.
Yeah. But yeah, on that note, let's pack her in, because I've been on the road for a long time the last 3 days, and yeah, kind of want to enjoy my enjoy my pillow for a little bit.
Well, you got to get some rest too, because you got a whole other series to be watching. Some 10 p.m. puck drops there between Dallas and Edmonton.
I wasn't gonna say it, but yeah, that's definitely why I want to get some sleep now, because I'm gonna be up until midnight for the next 2 weeks. So yeah, let's make it happen.